Hey, Soul Stories fam. We're starting a new love journey. Tell us where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe and join our family. Now stay with us. The story begins. There are nights when the universe seems to stand right behind you, giving you a gentle push just to see if you'll fall, or who knows, maybe you'll fly. Tonight, Lila Hartman had a very clear feeling that the universe was standing behind her and shoving her with both hands. Hey, chin up, chest forward, shoulders straight. No shaking, Maya Torres said, her tone sharp but her eyes sparkling like she was adjusting a star before its grand debut. Lila stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing herself. The black bodycon dress she had secretly sewn over 2 sleepless nights, just so she could accidentally look better than her ex, now looked genuinely dangerous. The exposed shoulders felt like someone was pouring moonlight over her skin. Her hips curved in a way that refused to be modest. The black fabric wrapped around her waist like a slow, knowing embrace. I think this is a little too revealing, Lila whispered, tugging the hem even though it wouldn't get any longer. Maya snapped her fingers. Revealing is good. Revealing is strategic. Revealing is for him to realize exactly what he lost. And if Tom Dalton isn't sorry, trust me, other women will be. Very sorry. Lila laughed, the sound trembling like a crystal glass quivering under warm light. We're going to support your marketing career, remember? Not for me to cosplay some revenge heroine. You're misunderstanding everything. Tonight, you are the revenge heroine and the muse who walks into the ballroom. Don't make me cry from pride too early. Maya adjusted Lila's hair, pinning it into a loose bun with a few strands falling around her neck, looking intentionally and unintentionally devastating at the same time. When they stepped into the grand hall of the Riverside Hotel, Lila nearly dropped her clutch. Warm golden light poured from massive crystal chandeliers, cascading into shimmering waterfalls across the polished floor. The background music was soft as satin, the scent of expensive perfume blending with the laughter of the elite, an atmosphere that made people want to marvel and sprint away at the same time. The invisible camera in Lila's head automatically spun 360 degrees, capturing the scene of her standing in the ballroom like a small but unshakable point of light. A cool gust from the air conditioner skimmed across her bare shoulders, raising goosebumps, but it was just enough to make her square them, lift her chin, and whisper to herself, "You're not here to shrink." "See?" Maya murmured, nudging her waist. "Every eye is on you. You look illegally good." "Maya, I'm serious. Hug the spotlight, baby." Lila didn't have time to respond before fate, always dramatic, slapped her across the face. Tom Dalton was standing less than 30 feet away. She recognized that slightly leaning posture, the kind of confidence learned from YouTube tutorials rather than real life. She recognized the navy suit she once complimented. She recognized the jawline she used to think was strong, but now only reminded her of overpriced decor. And she recognized his hand resting on someone else's waist, a blonde in a fire-red dress. Lila froze, her entire body turning into ice as if someone had dumped a bucket of Arctic water on her. Her glasses slipped from her fingers, a tiny drop, but big enough to knock her heart completely out of rhythm. The air seemed sucked out of the room, the lights smearing and blurring, spinning like a camera zooming hard into the pain she was desperately trying to contain. "Lila, are you okay?" Maya followed her gaze and instantly whispered a razor-sharp curse. Lila pressed her lips together. "Let's go. I have to get out. Now." She didn't wait a single second for her rational mind to catch up. She didn't hear Maya calling after her. She didn't care that her heels clacked loudly like the frantic heartbeat punching her ribs from the inside. She turned away, walked fast, then ran. Actually ran. The music behind her rose like mocking laughter. The shimmering lights of the ballroom stretched into long streaks trailing after her, like reminders of everything she thought she'd already healed from. The hotel corridor felt endless, the golden lights glinting off the marble floor, making everything look both luxurious and suffocating. The music from the ballroom faded behind her, but in Lila's ears there was only her heartbeat and that all too familiar voice that froze her spine. "Lila, wait!" Tom's voice, cold, slick, That kind of, I'm being polite but actually in control tone. Lila didn't turn around. She didn't want to look at the face that had made her heart ache to exhaustion just 10 minutes earlier. But after 2 steps, the heel of her custom shoe gave a sharp pop and snapped right off. No! Lila's cry was small, but desperate enough that even she wanted to vanish into dust. Before she could plan an escape, her other heel slipped and she stumbled, barely catching herself with a hand against the wall. Worse, Tom's footsteps grew louder, closer. She glanced around. The hallway was empty, sealed shut, no place to hide, except for a small door cracked open just enough. Not a suite, not a restroom, not an emergency exit, just a closet. Lila didn't think. Adrenaline didn't give her time. She darted inside and shut the door, but the moment she turned around, she went completely still. Someone was already there. A man, tall, sitting comfortably as if he were reading in a cafe. The masculine scent of his cologne thickened the air, stealing her breath. His breathing was calm. His eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Lila opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I didn't. He lifted a finger, signaling her to be quiet. Shh. His voice was low, warm, and hot enough to incinerate whatever confidence she had left. If you open that door right now, whoever's chasing you will see you immediately. Lila froze like polished stone. You know someone's following me. He tilted his head. His gray eyes gleamed with subtle amusement. You ran like you were auditioning for the lead in an action movie. The whole floor heard you. Then he leaned in slightly, close enough that his breath skimmed her cheek. And your broken heel announced it even louder. Lila gaped at him. You were watching me? If I were watching you, he shrugged, voice feather light, we'd be somewhere far more private than a closet. Lila almost choked on her own oxygen. She flicked on her phone's flashlight. She couldn't bear talking to a stranger in the dark without seeing his face. The small light illuminated him. Beautiful. Too beautiful. The kind of beautiful that should come with a viewer discretion warning. Sharp nose, defined jawline, storm gray eyes that looked cold yet sad, lips curled in a way impossible to tell if he was smirking or teasing. The closet suddenly felt microscopic. Every breath they took colliding, hot, humid, dangerous. Who are you? Lila demanded, voice a pitch too high. A creep or a very fancy janitor? He raised a brow, lowering the hand shielding his eyes. If I were a creep, we wouldn't be stuck in a sad little closet. His eyes glinted. We'd be somewhere nicer. What does that even mean? Lila flushed. I'm saying I'm not a creep, he smiled. As for janitor, he tugged lightly at his black tie and unbuttoned the top of his shirt. Do I look like one? Lila swallowed hard. Oh God, he was exactly the kind of man novels warned women about. Dangerous, gorgeous, and painfully aware of it. Outside, Tom's voice rang again. Lila, are you here? Lila's body froze. Her hand, without permission, grasped the hem of the stranger's shirt. He looked down at her hand. His lips curved a millimeter higher. Still want to go out there? He whispered, voice so deep her pulse trembled. If you open the door now, you'll crash right into him, and he'll know you're hiding because of him. Lila clenched her fist. No, I can't let him see me like this. Broken shoes, flushed face, heart chaos, humiliating. Good. He shifted over, making space for her to sit beside him on the floor. Then stay still. I'm not going to sell you out. Lila opened her mouth to reply, but her phone flickered. Low battery. The light sputtered like a horror movie effect, then died, plunging them back into darkness. In that instant, his cologne felt stronger, his breath closer. Her heartbeat slammed against her ribs like an escape attempt. Their knees brushed accidentally, and this forced closeness felt hotter than anything she'd ever known. Lila hissed softly, "Don't come any closer." "I haven't moved." His voice wrapped around the darkness like velvet. "But your heart is very close to me." "You don't know anything about my heart." "Oh." He leaned in, breath brushing her ear. On the contrary, it's beating for several reasons, and only half of them are because of the guy outside. Lila shivered. What's your name? Elias. She nodded instinctively, though he couldn't see it. I'm Lila, he finished. I heard him call you. His voice softened a fraction. Scared? Lila stayed silent for a few seconds, then whispered, I'm not scared of him. I'm scared of becoming the weak version of myself he once turned me into. Elias inhaled, not loud but enough for her to hear. You're not weak, he said. Weak is the one who has to chase someone who's already left him behind. Lila's throat tightened. Darkness made emotions roar. Thank you, she murmured. Elias didn't respond with words. Instead, he leaned closer. Close enough that her hair brushed his collar. The space between them shrank to a breath. Nothing more. Just tension, gravity, a magnetic pull, a touch that hadn't happened but burned hotter than one that had. And right then, Tom's voice echoed one last time, fading away. Lila didn't move. Elias didn't either. Only the darkness, the breath between them, and something perilously electric hovered in the air, waiting. Outside the supply closet, Tom's footsteps faded like the last ghost leaving Lila's heart, leaving behind a silence so sharp she could hear her own breathing. Each shaky inhale fueled by adrenaline, by the pain in her foot, by anger at life, and by the man standing mere inches away from her in this fragile sliver of darkness. He's gone, Lila whispered, her voice snapping softly like a thread after a storm. Elias didn't answer, but his silence made the space denser, as if his breath were brushing the back of her neck even though he hadn't moved. I'm getting out of here, Lila blurted, her words slicing through something forming in the shadows. Thank you, but I need to leave before… She didn't finish. She pushed the door open. White light flooded in, not gently like an angel, but sharp like a sudden blade, making her skin prickle and her mind snap awake. Lila stepped out of the closet like she was escaping a dangerous stunt scene. And maybe, if life had any mercy, the scene would have ended there. But life had no mercy, and Elias had even less. 1 second later. Ah! Not because of Tom, not because of her shoe, but because Elias, in an unconscious movement, stepped out too close behind her and caught the hem of her tight black dress she'd sewn herself, yanking the fabric downward. Lila staggered. The floor was too slippery. Her torn heel is too weak. Her whole body is too tense. A series of physical disasters unfolded with Hollywood precision in less than half a second. Her shoulder jolted forward. Her eyes flew wide. Her breath caught in her throat. The closet door hit her elbow, and her entire body fell straight into Elias. His hand, raised to call her name, instinctively reached out. Elias caught her waist just as she crashed into his chest, and their lips collided. A touch, soft, hot, unintentional, but strong enough to make the entire world slam to a halt. Their breaths merged into one. Lila let out a tiny sound that dissolved in the sudden closeness, her lips trembling from shock while Elias went rigid, his chest tensing as if that single accidental kiss had detonated every instinct he'd been trying to keep buried. Just 1 second, but it was a second stretched into the most beautiful, slow-motion shot of their lives. Lila tried to pull away, but Elias held her. Not rough, not forceful, just firm, like a man who knew that if he let go, she would fall or vanish. Her breath broke in a small gasp. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice shaking so hard it almost sounded like pleading. I didn't mean to. Lila, Elias said, his voice low like thunder rumbling in his throat. If that was an accident… He leaned in closer, close enough that their lips brushed again. A fleeting touch, a reminder. Then the next one won't be. Before she could process that, Elias tilted his head. One arm locked around her waist, the other sliding up the curve of her neck, his hand cupping her nape with a sensual gentleness that stole her breath. And he kissed her. No more accidents, no more clumsy collisions, just a real kiss. Deep, slow, restrained yet burning, like he had spent his entire life waiting for this exact second. his mouth pressed to hers, soft yet powerful, demanding but asking if she wanted this too. Lila melted instantly, her body folding into his, her hand curled into his shirt, not to push him away, but to anchor herself. Elias kissed her with the focus of a man who rarely let himself want anything, and when he did, he wanted it fully. Lila kissed him back, clumsy but real. The kiss lingered, then deepened. Their breaths mingled hot against each other, the darkness behind them pulling both of them into a private pocket of the world where nothing else existed. When their lips finally parted, Lila gasped as if she'd just sprinted through a storm. Elias lowered his forehead to hers, his voice hoarse enough to unravel anyone's sanity. That, he murmured, his breath brushing her lips, was not an accident. Lila's entire body swayed, her vision blurring for a moment. She wanted to kiss him again. Her body said so. Her heart said so. But her stubborn, cursed logic pulled her backward. She stepped away, but Elias stayed close, his hand still on her waist, his breath still warm on her neck. Lila! There was something dangerous in Elias's tone. Not threatening, but honest. Don't run. The words tightened her chest. Lila couldn't breathe fully, couldn't think fully, couldn't stand one more second near him without falling into whatever this was. She looked at him, those deep gray eyes, that hot breath, that hand still holding her like a claim. And Lila knew that if she didn't cut this moment off now, she would dissolve into it. She swallowed, her lips still swollen from his kiss. Let me go, she whispered, her voice small but sharp as a needle. Elias didn't move, didn't blink. He just tightened his grip on her waist, once, like committing the shape of her body to memory before letting her go. Then he released her, very slowly, very controlled, very reluctantly. Lila stepped back. One step, two. Her whole body felt tethered to him by an invisible pull, but she turned away, clenched her fists, and forced her heart into stillness. She walked out of the closet, no looking back, no daring to, and Elias stood in the shadows, his lips still damp with her breath, watching her leave as if that moment had taken something vital from him, something he didn't yet know how to get back. Then he stepped out too. The hallway outside blazed bright as Lila stepped out. The white lights reflecting off the marble walls made her bare feet look heartbreakingly fragile. One hand held her dying high heels. The other clutched the last trembling breath she had left after that kiss in the dark. The closet door behind her was still slightly open, casting a long shadow like a slash across the brightness. And the moment Elias crossed that threshold, the light hit him in a way that made him stand out as if he'd just been captured by an 8K camera in a deliberately slow, cinematic reveal. He stepped out, tall, composed, breath not fully steady, collar slightly askew, lips marked by a shadow like a silent confession no one could see, but everyone could feel. If there were music, it would be that dark, velvety piano kind, each note falling like slow rain. Lila didn't look back. She didn't dare. One glance and she feared she would fall straight into those eyes again and never escape. She hurried toward the corner of the corridor, leaning slightly, desperate to get away from whatever that moment had been. Reality or dream, she couldn't tell. But then a man's voice rang out. "Mr. Hartman, there you are. I've been looking for you." Lila froze. She wasn't sure she heard correctly. Her brain was still malfunctioning. Her heart even worse. Surely she was hallucinating. After several breathless seconds, she turned, very slowly, like moving too quickly might shatter her entire cellular structure. Elias stood there, and facing him was a young man in a black suit holding an iPad, wearing an earpiece. The look of a senior assistant who only appeared around frighteningly important people. "Mr. Hartman," the assistant repeated, crisp and professional. "The board is waiting for you downstairs in the ballroom. A few VIP investors want a word before your speech." Lila's mind crashed. Her eyes widened. Her body went cold. Her voice sputtered out like a dying engine. "What? Did he call you?" Elias turned toward her. In his eyes was something like, "I knew this moment would come, just not this fast." The assistant looked at Lila, then at Elias, then shut his mouth like a man who'd accidentally overheard a classified government secret. Elias slipped his hands into his pockets, exhaling in controlled frustration. "You're Hartman?" Lila asked again, her voice shooting up an octave, like a string pulled too tight. "I mean, which Hartman?" Elias. "The one you're thinking of." "No, no way. Hartman? That Hartman? Hartman of Hartman Dynamics? The host of tonight's gala? The giant logo in the middle of the ballroom?" The assistant flinched, not annoyed, just socially stunned. Elias rubbed the back of his neck, trying to stay calm. "Lila, hold on!" She stepped back like he was about to attack her heart again. "You're the one who owns the party I'm hiding from? The party you organized?" Elias opened his mouth, but Lila barreled on. "And you were in a closet with me? And you kissed me? And you're a CEO?" The assistant let out a tiny sigh and turned his head away like, "I was never here. I heard nothing." Elias took a step toward her, slow, careful, as if afraid she'd disappear if he moved too fast. "Lila," he said, voice deep, soft but powerful. "You can't kiss me and then vanish." The line hit the hallway like a blade, or an arrow. It lodged itself right in her chest, piercing the place she'd been trying to protect. "Excuse me?" Lila choked. "What did you just say?" Elias stood before her, not touching, but close enough that his breath made her knees shake. "I'm not letting you leave without—" "Without what?" she snapped, voice high with fear and confusion. "Without giving you my contact info? Pretending this never happened? Are you insane?" The assistant coughed again. Elias ignored him completely. He looked only at Lila. Those eyes deep, silent, beautiful, and dangerous like a city skyline reflected in a dark abyss. "You know what I want," Elias said slowly. "And you want it too." "No!" Lila backed up, wobbling on her bare feet. "I don't want anything except to forget what just happened." Elias stepped forward, just one small step, but enough for her pulse to leap into her throat. "You won't forget." "You can't say that," Lila stammered, trembling. I... She bit her lip, closed the door around her heart, and with a breath that felt like tearing herself apart, she said the only words that might let her survive this moment. "Let me go." Elias went still. Under the cold white lights of the corridor, he looked like a man trying to hold on to something slipping right out of his hands. Lila didn't wait for him to speak. She turned, grabbed her shoes, walked away, almost running. Elias watched her go, his eyes strained like they were about to break, like the kiss in the dark still burned in his chest, like he knew this moment was only the beginning. The assistant stood there smiling invisibly. The hallway stretched long and endlessly. Lila disappeared around the corner like a star falling out of the sky. Elias closed his hand slightly, the same hand that moments ago had touched her, as if weighing something he wasn't ready to let go. Lila thought she'd escaped. She'd gotten far enough away from that dazzling hotel, far enough from the blinding crystal lights of the ballroom, and far enough from the man who had just made her heart skip a dangerously unstable beat in the darkness of a supply closet. But footsteps, running, no, charging with the full desperation of a man who was used to controlling everything except his own emotions, echoed behind her like a drumbeat inside her chest. "Lila, stop!" She turned, and Elias burst out of the revolving doors of the hotel like he wasn't the host of the event, wasn't the CEO. Hundreds of tuxedoed guests were waiting for, like he was just a man running after something he refused to let himself lose. His tie was skewed to the side, the top buttons of his shirt undone, his breath rising in sharp waves against the night sky, and the streetlights hitting his unfairly beautiful face turned him into a perfect slow-motion shot filmed with the most expensive Hollywood equipment. She stood frozen, almost hypnotized. "You left 100 important people to run after me?" she said, trying to sound normal, but her voice trembled like a guitar string pulled too tight. Elias stopped in front of her, bracing one hand on the marble step, the other on his own knee, as if the run wasn't about stamina, but about her. He lifted his head, and his eyes, warm, sharp, focused, shot straight through her. "Who do you think is more important?" The night held its breath. The wind paused. Lila felt like she was standing inside a slow-motion version of her own life, where everything functioned normally except her heart. Don't say things like that, she whispered, tightening her grip on her heels. I don't fit into your world. Elias laughed softly. As he'd known all along, this wasn't a physical escape, but a heart trying to flee after being broken once and terrified of being shaken again. My world, Elias said, stepping closer until her heart jerked, walked out of the ballroom to follow you. Don't follow me. I can't. Elias, I'm not finished. She opened her mouth to argue, but Elias was already closer, not touching her, but the distance between them seemed to pull together as if by an unnamed gravity. I came out here, he said, lowering his voice to a velvet-smooth burn that made her skin prickle, because I'm not letting you disappear. The words hit harder than any sweet confession. It wasn't romance. It was instinct. It was a choice. It was dangerous. I didn't mean to disappear, she said, though her voice shrank, softened, torn between self-defense and surrender. You just ran from me. Because I panicked. I panicked too. You, a CEO, panicking? I panicked, Elias admitted, eyes unwavering, when I thought you'd leave without giving me a chance. Lila's voice died in her throat. Elias, you don't understand. I do. No, you don't. I understand perfectly. You're imposing. I'm being honest. She turned away, her heart pounding so violently it felt like it might burst out of her chest. He stood beside her in silence, a silence thick enough to feel like the night itself was holding both of them in the same current. Lila, he said, voice lower now, gentler but filled with resolve. Let's make a deal. 3 conditions. She frowned. A deal? Yes. You think I'm a criminal? No. He looked at her like she was something he had no intention of losing. I think you're something I want to keep. Elias! Don't deny it, you feel it too. She stepped back half a pace, the words hitting the exact rhythm of her pulse. That sentence made her knees weak. 3 conditions, Elias repeated. She folded her arms, forcing a careless tone. Fine. Say them. Condition 1. You don't disappear for the rest of tonight. We talk, like adults, somewhere bright. No closets. Okay. Condition 2. You give me a chance to explain why I kissed you. Her face flushed so violently she almost threw her heel at him. And condition 3, Elias stepped forward until they were separated by a single thin breath. You don't pretend that kiss didn't happen. Silence, tight, electric. Lila blinked rapidly, pure defensive reflex. Go back to your party before they think you've been kidnapped. I have been kidnapped, Elias said. By you. Elias! Lila exhaled shakily. Fine. Elias relaxed his shoulders as he'd just released a weight he'd been carrying, then said, Now give me your phone number. Lila raised an eyebrow. Condition 4? No. Universal law. I chased you into the night. I deserve your number. She blinked. My phone's dead. Elias stared at her for 3 seconds. Then he pulled out his wallet, took out a matte black business card, a silver embossed logo, and the subtle scent of cedar on the expensive paper. He held it out, not flaunting, but offering like a promise. Read me your number, he said, voice low, steady. I'll type it, and this, he placed the card in her hand, is mine. You call me, anytime. Lila looked at the card. Elias Hartman, CEO, Hartman Dynamics. A cold line ran down her spine. Not fear, the cold of realizing something irreversible had just begun. Go on, Elias prompted softly. Lila inhaled, then recited her number. Elias typed it into his phone, his eyes never leaving her, as if he were memorizing the digits instead of merely saving them. When he finished, he looked up. I'll call you after the event. Not a text, a call. I want to hear your voice. You're confident, aren't you? No, I'm certain. She tightened her grip on the card, thin but heavy with promise. Now, Elias said, taking one step back, though his gaze still touched her like an invisible hand, I'm going back inside. Good. Don't go too far. It's not like I'm saying I'll stand here waiting. I'm not asking you to wait, Elias smiled. I'm saying I'll find you. Then he turned, his silhouette swallowed by the golden light of the hotel, but Layla's heart felt like he was still standing right in front of her. Lila had no intention of leaving her apartment at 1 a.m. Not after the kiss in that pitch-black closet. Not after Elias Hartman, with those deep eyes and sinful lips, chased after her like she was the only thing in the world he refused to lose. But his voicemail, low, tired, warm like two hands grazing in the dark, made her heart tremble in a way she hated admitting. Lila, I just wrapped up the night. I need... No, I want to see you. You don't need makeup. Don't dress up. Just step outside if you're still awake. And so she stepped outside. New York never slept. The streets were quiet, but the lights burned like untold stories scattered across stairwells and fire escapes. Elias was waiting at the corner, shirt sleeves rolled, collar open 2 buttons down, tie nowhere to be found, hair tousled in that devastatingly attractive, I took off my tie with shaky hands way. She approached. Elias looked at her and smiled. A smile that made the entire night stop and bow for this one moment. You really came. You called. I reacted. Dangerous reflex, he murmured, stepping closer. But I like it. She glared. Her heart did not. Where exactly are we going? She asked, lifting her chin like she was still in control. Elias slid his hand into his pockets. I'm hungry, and you're guiding. Lila rolled her eyes, pointed toward the corner, where neon lights from a bodega flickered in red and green. Ever had instant ramen in a bodega? Elias frowned. You mean cup ramen? Yep. No. Perfect, Lila nodded. Tonight, you get enlightened. She pushed the door open. A bell chimed. The air smelled like paper, old coffee, cheese-flavored snacks. The scent of a city still awake, still restless. Elias followed behind her, looking like a CEO who'd been teleported into another dimension, observing shelves with cautious fascination. She picked 2 cups of ramen, shrimp flavor and spicy chicken. He eyed them like a risky investment pitch. These are edible? Elias, she crossed her arms. You literally ate sushi earlier that cost half my monthly rent. Let me show you what real people eat. He tilted his head. Am I not real? You're aesthetically excessive. Elias chuckled, low, short, and lethal. She led him to the hot water dispenser, opened the lids, poured the water, closed the cups, set them on the small table near the entrance. Then they sat on the bodega steps, steam rising between them like a thin curtain. An indie film shot in the silhouette of streetlights. Now we wait 3 minutes, she said. 3 of the longest minutes of my life. She laughed. When the noodles softened, she tore open the sauce packet and squeezed chili paste inside. You handle spicy? I can handle anything you handle. That is a dangerously loaded sentence. Elias lifted a forkful of noodles, blew gently, fogging the space between them, then tasted. He frowned. Spicy but good. Exactly, that's the... He licked a smear of chili from his lower lip. Slow, precise, unintentional but hitting every nerve in her body like a heat wave erupting under her skin. Lila forgot how air worked. Elias watched her. What? Nothing. You're looking at me like I just committed a felony. Now, possibly. Elias licked his lips again, this time deliberately. Leela almost dropped her ramen. I hate how you use your mouth like a weapon. They act on their own, he said, voice husky. I didn't authorize them. By the time they reached her building, the New York night wind swept past, whispering that something was about to rewrite her entire life. Elias stopped beneath the warm glow spilling from the entrance, the light wrapping around him like a halo made for a man too real, too present, too hazardous for her heart. Thanks for tonight, he said. It was just a meetup. With ramen. Yeah. At 1 a.m. Yeah. That's a date. No. Yes. She exhaled sharply. Then Elias lifted his hand, slow, gentle, and placed it on her waist, pulling her closer by half a breath. The light traced her collarbone. His eyes dropped to her mouth. Lila, he said, voice raising her body heat by 3 degrees. Can I kiss you in the light? Her lips parted. No sound. Just as his mouth nearly touched hers, her phone rang. Caller ID Maya, and a scream blasted through the speaker. Are you home yet? Did the CEO kidnap you? Send your location or I'm calling 911. Elias chuckled, bowing his head slightly like thanking fate for stopping him from committing a second-degree kiss. Your friend is fiercely protective. She thinks you're dangerous. So do I. His eyes never left her lips. But I'm not kissing you while your friend is in crisis mode. Lila blushed so hard she could feel it in her ears. Elias stepped back, though his voice still wrapped her like heat. Good night, Lila. Good night, Elias. He turned, walking slowly into the New York darkness. He didn't look back, but Lila knew he was thinking about the kiss that almost happened. As the elevator doors closed behind her, Maya texted again, "Send photo proof you're alive." Lila covered her face, heart exploding like fireworks. She typed one sentence, "I'm not kidnapped, but I think I'm about to be kissed." Ever since that night under the golden light outside the bodega, when Elias had licked a streak of hot sauce off his lip in a way that seemed accidental but knocked Layla completely off balance, nothing between them exploded. But something began to smolder. A slow, steady heat, seeping into the small, ordinary corners of her life. There were no confessions, no official dates, no dramatic declarations. Only a short morning text like, "Did you eat yet?" Late-night phone calls when the city felt exhausted. Elias coincidentally walking past her workplace. A latte appearing on her desk with no sender. And the soft, rare laugh he saved only for her whenever they ran into each other. Both of them tried to keep their distance, or pretended to, but that distance kept shrinking. Quietly, subtly, in a way neither of them initiated, but neither could stop. Lila didn't call it love, she didn't dare. But every time she talked to Elias, her heart softened for reasons she couldn't explain. A feeling that was dangerous but not threatening, warm but not too close. Something that made her want to step forward even while her logic continued to step back. And then that night, the night New York was hit by the biggest rainstorm of the month, crashing in like a thief. Everything shifted. The rain came down hard. Not romantic rain. Cold, punishing rain, mixed with winds so strong, taxis refused to pick up passengers. Trains shut down. And the street in front of Lila's building flooded like a rising basin. She stood beneath the tiny awning outside the newsroom, hugging her bag to her chest to shield her phone. It was past 1 a.m. There was no way home. She exhaled, shivering from the cold. She thought about texting Maya, but her phone was at 3%. She thought about calling an Uber, but the app flashed no drivers available. She tried to stay calm, but she was, in truth, desperate. Then a black car pulled up in front of her. The headlights scattered across the rain, turning the drops into shards of glass. The window rolled down. Elias. Dark shirt, damp with rain, hair slightly wet, his eyes tense like he had driven across the whole city just to find her. "Lila," he said, voice dropping low, woven into the storm like a soundtrack she wasn't meant to escape. "You think I don't know when it's going to rain?" She froze. Her heart felt gripped, gently, firmly, by an invisible hand. "Why? Why are you here?" she whispered. "Because you couldn't get home," Elias replied without hesitation. "And I'm not leaving you standing in the rain like this." She bit her lip, trying to hide the trembling. I was going to call a cab." "No cab is coming." Elias opened the car door. "Get in." "Elias, I can't." "Lila." His voice softened, but carried a pull that made her fall silent. "Get in the car. Don't make me worry anymore." Lightning tore across the sky. She swallowed, and finally stepped inside, the warmth of the cabin wrapping around her like a soft blanket after a long day. Elias placed his coat over her shoulders, as if he'd known he would need it. As the car began to move, he said quietly, "You can't go home tonight. You're coming to the penthouse. You'll sleep in the guest room. Nothing will happen, I promise." It wasn't a proposition, not a suggestion, not an opportunity for something reckless. It was simply a man seeing her cold, wet, exhausted, and choosing to protect her. Not claim, not push, just protect. Lila turned her face to the rain outside the window, hiding the way her heart was pounding. And she didn't protest, not even a little. Outside, rain battered the black sky. Inside the car, the only thing between them was Elias's warm, steady breath, and a quiet sense of safety she didn't dare name. Morning light streamed through the thin silk curtains of the penthouse like molten gold dripping from the sky, mingling with the lingering chill after last night's rain. It was in that precise moment that Lila finally woke. Not in the panicked, disoriented way of someone realizing she slept in a stranger's home, but slowly, gently, as though the sleep had peeled away a layer of exhaustion she'd been carrying for months. The guest bedroom alone was so vast she couldn't quite understand why she'd been placed on such a large bed, wrapped in sheets that smelled faintly of sandalwood, with a warm comforter and an extra throw blanket folded neatly at the foot of the bed, as if he'd been worried she might get cold in the night. Her dress from last evening hung perfectly pressed on a rack, already dried, and on the armchair near the window was— Lila shut her eyes for a second. A white dress shirt belonging to Elias. Pristine, smooth, smelling of soap and something else that made her heartbeat crash against her ribs. She slipped into it. The cotton was cool against her neck before warming to her skin, the hem brushing mid-thigh, the buttons slightly loose, deliberately framing her bare collarbones as though the shirt had been designed for her, not him. Barefoot, she stepped out of the room, the light trailing across her skin like a slow-motion cinematic effect. The penthouse was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat as she pushed open the kitchen door. Elias stood there. His back was to her. The formal shirt from last night had been replaced with a gray-fitted t-shirt that clung just enough to reveal the sculpted lines of his chest and shoulders. His hair was still damp at the tips, as if he'd just showered. The scent of fresh coffee mixed with a subtle trace of his cologne, turning the room into something undeniably and dangerously masculine. "Good morning," he said without looking back. His voice was low, warm, sliding down her spine like a kiss. Good morning," Lila replied, trying to sound composed but failing instantly when he turned slightly, eyes sweeping over her, from tousled hair to the shirt she was wearing. His gaze nearly forced her knees to give out. She wanted to sit down, or run, or do something in between that had no name. "I left the shirt there so you'd have something comfortable to wear," Elias said, stepping toward her with the slow, confident stride of a man who knew exactly the effect he had. "Didn't expect it to suit you this well." "It's only because my dress was wet," she stammered. "Lila," he leaned closer, dropping his voice to an impossible register. "That's the best-looking shirt I've ever seen on anyone." Heat rushed to her face so fast she felt it down in her knees. To break the tension, she glanced at the stove. "What are you doing?" "Eggs," he said, lifting the pan, and pretending to be normal. She laughed, a real laugh, the kind that seemed to melt something heavy in her chest. "Let me help." She walked around him, stepping into the kitchen, but forgot she was barefoot on polished wood. She slipped a little, body tilting forward. Elias turned instantly, one arm looping around her waist as if she weighed nothing, his cologne brushing the side of her neck, his breath sliding into her hair. The moment felt like the opening beat of a scene everyone knew would ignite. "Careful," Elias murmured, his breath warm against her skin. "You're making me lose control." Before she could respond, he set the pan down and, without hurry, wrapped both arms fully around her, pulling her closer in a way that was almost unbelievable in its restraint. There she stood in the middle of his enormous penthouse kitchen, wearing his shirt, his hands brushing the bare line of her lower back where the fabric parted, and the world shrank to just the two of them. "This place," Elias whispered, lips hovering not half a breath from hers, his voice rasping as something pulled straight from the edge of sanity, "has smelled like only one thing since last night." She barely breathed. "Me? You!" The word fell from his mouth like its own kiss. Lila pressed a hand to his chest, meaning to push him away, yet every cell in her knew she wasn't going anywhere. She pulled him closer. The kiss happened right then. Not a hesitant brush or trembling touch, but an explosion, deep and inevitable, like every breath trapped in the room since last night had been waiting for this detonation. Elias kissed her like he'd been waiting his whole life. One hand slid to the back of her neck, fingers threading through her hair as though anchoring himself. The other at her waist, drawing her close enough for her to feel every breath, every shift of his muscles. Lila answered without fear, without doubt, without shields, letting her heart lead for the first time in months. And when she parted her lips, the world dissolved into the space between their bodies. When they finally broke apart, their breaths mingled with the smell of coffee and sunlight. Elias rested his forehead against hers. "Lila," he said, voice ragged enough to tear her heart open, "if last night was the beginning, then this morning, I don't want us to pretend we're strangers." She swallowed. "What are you saying?" "I want you," Elias said, slow, deliberate, each word anchored in something unshakable. "In my life, not for one night, not as an accident in a closet, not as a misplaced kiss in a kitchen. I want us." Lila trembled like someone standing in a cold wind. I I want that too," she whispered, chest rising and falling with the truth she'd been afraid of. "But I'm scared." "Then let me be scared with you," he murmured, pulling her against him. "And let us choose each other, starting today." She looked into his eyes, bright, earnest, blazing enough to burn away her last defenses, and smiled, fragile and fierce all at once. "Okay," she said softly. "We're a couple." Elias kissed her again, gentle but deep, like sealing the first page of something neither of them planned, but both needed. And outside the window, the morning light fell over them, like a film shot for a year, just to roll at this exact second. Because this was the moment the story finally began. The gentle morning in Elias's warm kitchen, where sunlight poured in soft golden streaks and their kisses still lingered hot on their lips. No one could have guessed that just 2 days later, everything would be swallowed by another storm. Not a storm of rain, but a storm of eyes. Of judgment, of an entire city watching. Lila wasn't famous. She knew that. But she wasn't prepared to become everyone's topic, especially when whatever existed between her and Elias had only just begun to be named. Her phone buzzed while she was heading home after work. A text from Maya popped up. "Don't panic, but something happened." The moment she tapped the link, her world tilted beneath her feet. CEO Elias King dating. Nobody designer, and who is she? Dozens of other headlines pelted down like hail. Average looks, average career. What made the CEO notice her? Ex-boyfriend reveals she's nothing special. Did Elias fall into the trap of a girl trying to upgrade her life? Lila's family is working class. Too big of a gap for the King family? Each sentence scraped across Lila's heart like claws. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through the comments. Girls like her always try to latch onto CEOs. She's not even pretty. Classic gold digger. Nothing special but wants to climb high. The last one struck the deepest. You're nothing special. Her ex's voice rose from the pit of her memory, so clear it punched the air out of her lungs. A sentence she thought she'd buried, now repeated by thousands like a verdict. Standing on a noisy New York sidewalk, she felt small enough to disappear into the crowd. Elias arrived at her apartment in less than 30 minutes after she sent a short text. "Can you come?" He stepped inside, his silver blue eyes soft in the way they only were for her. "Lila, are you all right?" She tried to smile, but her lips trembled. "I didn't think it would blow up like this." Elias moved closer, wanting to hold her, but she stepped back, not from him, but from the feeling that she was too small to stand beside a man like him. "I can take care of this," Elias said, his voice low and steady. "I have legal teams, PR teams, everything I need to stop this." And that was the moment something inside her snapped. "You think the problem is PR?" she asked, her voice barely steady. "Elias, they're right. I don't belong in your world." He frowned, like she'd spoken the most absurd thing he'd ever heard. "What are you talking about?" Lila took a breath, fighting tears, but her voice still cracked. "I don't want to be someone you have to fight for. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want you to look back one day and realize, I'm not someone you should have chosen." Elias stepped closer, but she lifted her hand, A small gesture, but strong as a wall. Elias, you're the CEO of a major corporation, someone the entire world watches. I'm just a regular designer with an unimpressive career and no fancy background. I'm not someone worth protecting. His gaze softened as if his heart hurt alongside hers. Lila, you don't understand. Tears fell. I've heard you're nothing special my entire life. I thought I'd gotten past it, but when other people say it, when thousands repeat it, she pressed a trembling hand to her chest. I believe it's true. Lila, please don't. The closer you are to me, the heavier the pressure gets for you. Her voice broke. I love you, but loving you doesn't mean I get to drag you down with me. Elias went rigid. That sentence, the last one, was the only thing he never wanted to hear from her. You're not dragging me down, he said, slow and deep. You lift me up. No, she shook her head. I'm not strong enough to stand beside you. In that moment, Elias wanted to pull her into his arms, wanted to hold her with every ounce of strength he had. But Lila's eyes were full of fear and self-doubt, so fragile that a single touch might shatter her. I need to be away from you for a while, she whispered. Lila, his voice broke, so you can be better. Rain started falling as she opened the door. Elias followed but didn't touch her, standing in the doorway like a man fighting the strongest instinct he had, to hold on to the woman he loved. I don't want you to go, he said, rain soaking through his hair. I know. She looked at him through a blur of tears and rain. But if I stay, I won't be myself anymore. Wind whipped through the hallway carrying the scent of an approaching storm, and they stood there, a small distance between them but containing an entire universe. Elias lifted his hand, then stopped halfway. He didn't touch her. He knew, and if he pulled her back now, he would break something deeper than her heart. Lila turned away, stepping down the stairs into the rain. Elias remained there, letting the storm drench him like a warning. Losing her was the one thing he could not survive. But he let her go. Not because he wanted to, but because she needed him to. The door closed behind her. The rain drowned out the sound of his heartbeat. And through the thick curtain of storm, Lila's silhouette faded. They didn't separate because the love had run out. They separated because they loved each other too much to hurt each other any further. Winter arrived like a cold hand on the shoulder, and New York slipped into those days when a single breath turned into a wisp of white fog before it vanished. Bryant Park had changed color. The once fiery red maples now reduced to bare branches, dusted with snow as fine as powdered sugar on a pastry. Lila sat on a wooden bench near the fountain, cold seeping through her tights and flats like tiny knives. She had thought this Friday afternoon would help her forget the whispers, the articles, the cruel comments tearing at her identity. But her body still felt unbearably heavy, as if she was carrying a wound she didn't even know where to bandage. She tightened her gloved hands, trying to hold on to a little warmth, but her fingertips were numb, almost frozen. A jogger passed by, leaving behind a trail of fog. A couple across the park laughed as they wrapped scarves around each other. An old man fed pigeons, his breath puffing into little clouds. And she just sat there, trying not to cry again. You're not enough. You're nothing special. He deserves someone better. Those words looped in her mind, clinging to her like stubborn shadows refusing to let go. A snowflake landed on her hand, then another. And when she lifted her head, the snow began falling. Slow, steady, soft, like the sky was exhaling. Lila exhaled too, her breath dissolving into the cold air. She thought she was alone until she heard footsteps. Slow, heavy, familiar enough that her heart stuttered. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. He stood behind her for several seconds, torn between stepping closer or respecting the distance she had created. Elias's voice, low and hushed, sounded like someone who hadn't slept in days. Lila. She closed her eyes. She wasn't ready to face him. Not his expression, not his presence, not anything that had to do with Elias King, the man she had fallen for too quickly and hurt just as fast. But when she turned, he was there. a long black coat dusted in snow, hair tousled, dusted white at the ends, cheeks flushed from the cold. And those silver blue eyes, eyes that once melted her resolve, looking at her now with worry, regret, and something that made her heart ache. He stepped toward her. Didn't say another word, just held out his hand. She stared at it. Large, warm, trembling slightly from the cold, yet extended like a silent plea. You shouldn't be out here in this weather, he said, voice so low it sounded like a confession. I just needed quiet. Her voice was barely louder than the falling snow. Lila, I'm sorry. She turned away, not out of anger, but because her eyes were burning again. You didn't do anything wrong, she whispered. I just don't fit in your world. Elias sat beside her, leaning close enough for his breath to mingle with the air beside her cheek. Don't say that! His voice cracked, actually cracked. I don't want to hear you make yourself smaller. But it's true, she insisted, fists clenching. You have status, power, an entire universe orbiting around you. I'm just... Elias didn't let her finish. In a moment that felt like a slow-motion snow scene from a movie, he reached up and cupped her face, his touch gentle, but so sure she froze in place. His fingers brushed her cheek down to her jaw. Then both hands held her face, warm enough to make her want to collapse into him. Lila, listen to me. His voice was rough, deep, and heartbreakingly sincere. I don't need perfect. His thumb wiped away a tear she didn't realize had fallen. I need you. She blinked hard, as if the words had shattered everything she had been clinging to. Elias leaned closer, their breasts turning white between them, his nose almost touching hers, close enough to see each tiny cloud of air disappearing. I need you, he repeated, quieter and deeper, the kind of tone that lodged itself into a person's ribs. Not despite what you think are flaws, but because of them. His fingers traced her cheek like he was memorizing her. Because you're kind. Because you're independent. Because you still dare to love after being hurt. Because you made my kitchen smell like coffee just by standing there. Because for the first time in my life, my heart didn't feel alone. A tiny sob escaped her. Elias leaned even closer, now separated by only a breath. If you think you're not enough, then let me be the one to tell you. He rested his forehead against hers. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Lila couldn't hold it anymore. All the fear, the walls, the self-doubt melted into her tears, and Elias kissed her at that exact moment. A kiss in winter, hot like the first breath after surfacing from water. Slow like time had paused just for them. Deep like he was pulling her back from somewhere she'd been lost. Snow fell around them, soft, beautiful, as though the world itself had cued the perfect scene for their reunion. Elias wrapped her in his arms, one hand behind her head, holding her like she might slip away with the next gust of wind. When they finally pulled apart, panting, cheeks flushed, lashes wet, he said, voice shaking but resolute, "Don't leave me again." He drew her close, chin resting atop her hair. If the world hurts you, let me be where you run. Not because I'm stronger, but because I choose you. Every day. Lila pressed her face against his chest, warmth spreading over her like a blanket against the winter air. She wrapped her arms around him. I choose you too, she whispered, voice fragile but true. I was just so scared. I know, Elias murmured, kissing the top of her head. And I'm here. Snow continued falling, the streetlights turning each flake into gold. They stayed in that embrace so long it felt like winter itself paused to witness a promise neither of them spoke aloud, but both understood perfectly. They had found each other again, and this time, nothing, not even the world outside, could come between them. Elias's home sat deep in Riverside Drive, where classic brownstone stood with the quiet dignity of preserved vintage book pages, and every window glowed with warm, buttery light that made the entire street look like it was being filmed on the analog stock. Lila tightened her grip on Elias's hand when the car stopped in front of his family's three-story home. A place too spacious, too serene, too unmistakably upper class, to the point she felt like she'd stepped into a winter-themed episode of The White Lotus. Elias glanced over with the kind of reassuring smile he only ever used on her. You okay? Okay in the sense that I'm about to meet the parents of a CEO. He let out a quiet laugh, soft as embers glowing beneath snow. They're going to love you, trust me. The door opened. Elias's mother appeared first. Slender, silver hair swept neatly in a way that made her look both elegant and warm. She didn't rush forward to hug or interrogate. She didn't scan Lila from head to toe like Lila feared. She simply smiled with that quintessential American smile. Friendly, open, but with enough space to feel respectful. You must be Lila. I'm Margaret. Nice to meet you, Mrs. King. Oh, please, call me Margaret. She invited them inside. The house didn't flaunt wealth. Instead, it held the quiet luxury of lychee-scented candles, oil paintings, and framed family photos arranged with intention. A small wine cabinet, a perfectly prepared charcuterie board. Elias's father stepped out from the study, tall with the sharp, seasoned gaze of an old-school attorney. You're the designer Elias told us about, he said, voice low and warm. Your work is impressive. Lila froze. Elias had talked about her? She turned toward him. He only smiled and lifted his wine glass as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Dinner unfolded so perfectly it almost felt unreal. No invasive questions. No, how much do you make a year? No, so when's the wedding? Just gentle, warm conversation. Enough for Lila to feel truly seen. Margaret shared how Elias once turned purple, refusing violin lessons. His father recounted Elias losing his first chess match to him and being too proud to sleep afterward. Elias simply sat there, arm draped along the back of Lila's chair, lips curving whenever she laughed. And Lila realized, in this home, Elias was a version of himself the world rarely got to witness. Softer, calmer, full of quiet warmth. She didn't feel unworthy anymore. She only felt like she belonged to him. The next day, it was Elias's turn to step into her world. In Queens, her mother's apartment sat inside an old red brick building with a heater clanking in the background, the smell of toasted bread drifting through the air, and a small radio playing classical music. The kind of indie lived-in home that felt more real and more comforting than any rich house could ever manage. Lila's mother opened the door with a relaxed smile and an air kiss in the American way. So you're Elias. I've heard a lot about you. Elias flushed lightly. Ma, I didn't say anything that counts as a lot. You said little, but your eyes said plenty. Lila nearly collapsed onto the sofa. Her mom wasn't blunt in the Asian way. She was blunt in the American indie way, casual, witty, light but piercing. Dinner was cream of mushroom soup, hot grilled cheese, and Coca-Cola served in an old glass cup. Elias sat cross-legged on the small sofa like he'd been doing it his entire life. Being a CEO sounds stressful, Lila's mom said. Elias smiled. Actually, the least stressful moments are when I'm with Lila. Her mother set her spoon down and tilted her head. That is exactly the right answer. Elias laughed. Lila covered her face. The apartment was small, the table tiny, the meal simple. But Elias ate as if it were the most authentic dinner he'd ever had. When her mom stepped out to take a call on the balcony, Elias leaned over and lightly touched Lila's hand. I like this place, he murmured. It feels like you. Warm, honest, nothing hidden. Not like your house. Not like any place I've ever known. Her heart slowed, then thudded louder. In that moment, in the little kitchen with its warm lights and the scent of grilled cheese still hanging in the air, Lila understood. It wasn't two worlds brushing against each other. It was two people choosing to step into each other's worlds. At the same time, in the same rhythm, with the same heart. That night, New York glowed beneath a pale gold haze, like the city had been dusted with a thin layer of champagne-colored varnish. Rain from earlier still clung to the sidewalks, reflecting the streetlights like scattered shards of tiny mirrors. And Lila, wrapped in a caramel long coat, walked beside Elias, completely unaware that her heart was about to be stolen all over again. Elias told her, I want to show you something. She raised a brow. Is it another fancy event? Elias, I do not have the mental strength today for one more woman with a $10,000 necklace asking me what freelance designer means. He laughed, low, warm, the kind of laugh that seemed to tilt the night breeze toward them. No party, just a place. A place that belongs to you. The door of a small gallery opened, a warm, dim space lit only by tall candles lining the walls. And the moment Lila stepped inside, the entire world seemed to halt. She froze. Her heart stopped. Her breath tangled in her throat. On each pristine white wall hung her work, all of it. The logo she once designed, the book fair flyer from the shop down the street, the poster she edited until 3 in the morning, the illustrations she uploaded on Etsy just for fun. Even the projects she had once labeled tiny, insignificant, no one cares. Everything was printed large, framed with professional lighting, displayed as if she were an artist the world had overlooked for far too long. Lila raised a trembling hand to her mouth, her chest tightening with a strange mixture of shock, joy, fear, and something that felt like being fully, completely seen for the first time. Elias! Her voice was barely a breath. Elias stood a few steps behind, hands in his pockets, candlelight glinting along the sharp line of his nose, making him look almost unreal, like someone crafted with CGI. The air itself seemed to slow, the gallery holding its breath with her. You did this? Because of me? Her voice cracked. No, he said, stepping closer. I did this for you. I'm just a small designer. Lila. He said her name like a melody. You see the world differently. You make beauty out of things people call small. I want you to see yourself the way I do. Clear, vibrant, and too valuable to fit on any wall. Lila's eyes stung. She turned away to steady herself, walking slowly along the gallery, taking in each piece as if she were watching her own life in frames. Elias followed one step behind, close enough for his breath to skim her neck whenever she paused, far enough not to touch but near enough that his presence touched every inch of her skin. I've never, she swallowed, never seen everything I've done feel important like this. Because until now, Elias said, his voice low as warm honey, you've been seeing yourself through someone else's eyes. He stepped behind her, placing a hand on her shoulder. So lightly she shivered. But I want you to try seeing yourself through mine. Lila turned around, and in that moment the candles weren't what lit the room. The way Elias looked at her did. Like every artwork in the gallery was merely the backdrop for the one masterpiece he recognized. Her. She tried to laugh, to break the rising tension. You're trying to make me lose my breath, aren't you? Only if you let me. Elias lifted his hand, placing 2 fingers under her chin, tilting it up. A slow, gentle touch, but so intimate it made Lila feel as if her entire body had turned to light. You have no idea, he whispered, eyes locked on hers, how beautiful you are when you're doing what you love. In that candlelit space, surrounded by the walls holding her life's work, his words were a confession more profound than any roses, any gala, any oath. Lila exhaled shakily, her breath trembling like wind brushing bare skin. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth through her coat. Can I kiss you here? Elias asked, inviting, respectful, with a velvet deep tone that set her spine on fire. She should have said no, should have stepped back, should have played it cool. But her heart had already chosen before her logic could interfere. Yes. One word, and the air shattered. Elias leaned in. The kiss wasn't like the one at her doorstep, nor the one in the rain in Chapter 9. It was hotter, deeper, layered with something that vibrated straight through to her chest, as if he were kissing every old wound, every year she'd believed she wasn't worth anything. One hand held her chin, and the other slid around her waist, pulling her into him, a connection that made her feel like she was dissolving, drawn into a gravity that belonged only to him. The scent of candles, wood, printed paper, and Elias's expensive cologne wove together into a heady haze that made Lila feel like she was kissing someone who had always been meant for her. When they finally parted, Elias rested his forehead against hers, their breaths mingling, hot and unsteady. You, he murmured, voice hoarse, are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. In the gallery with candlelight turning their eyes molten, Lila understood what Elias had known for a long time. Love isn't when two people stand in perfect light. Love is when one person is brave enough to shine light on the parts of the other that the world had once overlooked. And tonight, in a room full of her own creations, Lila knew with absolute clarity she had fallen in love with Elias King. The Riverside Hotel stood silent that winter night, gleaming like a massive block of crystal beneath the city sky. Inside, the lobby fireplace crackled, the scent of pine lingering in the air. But all of it was nothing compared to the thunder pounding inside Lila's chest as Elias held her hand and guided her down the familiar hallway. The same hallway she once ran through in fear. The hallway of cold marble walls where she once gasped upon seeing Tom. The hallway that led to the closet, the place where everything began. But now their footsteps sounded different. No trembling, no panic, no shadows. This time Lila walked beside him as though every wrong turn she'd ever taken had been nothing but a detour leading her right here, right now. Elias, she whispered, because he was too quiet, too focused, too moved. What are we doing here? He squeezed her hand, his voice low, rough, dangerously beautiful, like the richest version of his cologne. You're about to find out. The closet door opened, and Lila forgot how to breathe. It was no longer a closet, no darkness, no cleaning supplies, no cold draft from a rusty vent. Instead, a sky of fairy lights. Thousands of tiny bulbs dangled from the ceiling like constellations brought down just for them. A plush faux fur rug covered the floor. Floating frames hung in the air. Pictures of her laughing, painting, adjusting a draft, standing in the wind, looking at him in the gallery. A vase of white peonies, her favorite. A bottle of chilled champagne. The space looked like a scene straight from a Hollywood romance film. Not for just any heroine, for her. Lila lifted a trembling hand to her lips. Elias, God, you... Words abandoned her. Elias stood behind her, his hand brushing gently along her waist. A touch soft, yet charged enough to flip her breath inside out. His voice dropped, velvet dark. That day you came here to hide from pain. Lila turned. The fairy lights cast a halo over his cheekbones, deepening the blue of his eyes into midnight oceans. Tonight, Elias said, stepping closer, his hand trailing down her back with possession and reverence intertwined. I want you to come here for love. Her heart cracked open. Her eyes shimmered in the light. Elias reached into his coat and took out a deep blue velvet box. He inhaled, one deep anchored breath, the kind a man takes when his certainty is absolute, but his heart is trembling anyway. Then he knelt. Such a simple movement, but it struck her like lightning. Elias, she breathed, nearly sobbing. He looked up at her, the look of a man who had finally surrendered to his truth. Lila, he said, each word clear, yet shaking with emotion. I once had everything. Money, power, empty praise, parties where everyone wanted a piece of me. But I never felt alive. Not until you ran into this closet and stepped on my foot. She laughed through her tears, a choked, beautiful sound. He continued, I love you when you're scared but still trying to stand tall. I love you when you fight to prove yourself, even when the world wants to tear you down. I love you in the mornings when you wear my shirt and have no idea how you turn my entire existence inside out. I loved you in that gallery, staring at your work without knowing you were the most breathtaking creation in the room. He opened the box. A ring. Simple, elegant, gleaming under the fairy lights. I don't promise to shield you from life. I promise to walk through every part of it with you. His voice rasped. Lila Hart, will you let me love you in the very room that once terrified you? Will you let this be the place where the most beautiful part of our lives begins? Tears ran down her cheeks. Lila didn't hesitate. She rushed into him, pulled him up, wrapped herself around him like she intended to become part of him, her voice breaking against his lips. Yes. She kissed the word into his breath, into his skin, into the space where his body trembled because of her. Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes. Elias gripped her waist, lifting her effortlessly, their bodies pressed together like waves crashing in a rising tide. Their kiss wasn't gentle, it wasn't shy, it was a kiss born from storms, from headlines, from doubt, from fear, from two people who fought the world and still chose each other. It was deep enough to erase distance, fierce enough to rewrite fate. One hand tangled in her hair, the other holding her firm at the waist, pulling her into him like gravity had finally found its home. The fairy lights flickered behind them, gilding her hair with gold like a coronation. When the kiss broke, only to steal another breath, Elias leaned his forehead against hers. "I love you," he whispered. "Not because you're perfect, but because you're you. And I'll love you that way for the rest of my life." Lila's voice cracked, raw and real. "I loved you the moment you said, 'Don't go out there, he'll see you.' I loved you the moment you protected me from the world and from the fear inside myself." Elias held her close again, kissing her beneath the glowing lights. Behind them, the closet door slowly closed, fairy lights glowing like a miniature sunrise, and Lila knew. Back then, she entered the closet to hide. Tonight, she walked into it to fall in love. And from this moment on, as his hand closed around hers, as their lips met again, as golden light spilled through the crack of the closing door, a new chapter of their story began.